I never thought this would be my story. I remember the moment my world shifted. It wasn't an earthquake or a sudden thunderstorm. It was quiet, almost unassuming, like the world hadn't caught up to the weight of what had just happened. I was sitting in the small, sterile office of a clinic I'd visited a dozen times before. The nurse walked in, her face carefully neutral. That neutrality told me everything before she even opened her mouth. Your test came back positive. Positive. Such a strange word to deliver such devastating news. At first, I couldn't speak. My mind was running 1,000 miles a second, but none of the thoughts made sense. Was it real? Had they made a mistake? Could it really be happening to me? Then, the nurse handed me a pamphlet about living with HIV, and reality hit like a freight train. I walked out of the clinic in a daze, clutching the pamphlet like a lifeline. The world outside was still turning. Cars honking, people laughing, a baby crying. But my world had stopped. Every step I took felt disconnected from the earth, like I was floating in a bubble of shock and disbelief. I got to my car, sat behind the wheel, and stared at nothing for what felt like hours. I didn't tell anyone for weeks. Not my best friend, not my mom, not even the partner I had been dating for 3 months. I was terrified of the stigma, the judgment, the questions. I became a master of pretending. On the outside, I was the same old me, smiling at work, posting goofy selfies, hanging out with friends. But on the inside, I was crumbling. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake replaying every decision, every moment that led me to this point. The guilt was suffocating. Why didn't I insist on protection that one time? Why didn't I get tested sooner? But guilt wasn't going to change anything. It just sat there, heavy and unrelenting, like a stone in my chest. Finally, I forced myself to research. I spent hours online reading articles, watching videos, and joining forums. I learned about antiretroviral therapy, viral loads, and the concept of being undetectable. I read story after story of people living full, vibrant lives with HIV. It gave me hope, but I was still scared. Scared of how people would treat me. Scared of what this meant for my future. Would I ever have a family? Would I ever feel normal again? The day I told my mom was one of the hardest of my life. I sat her down, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear my own words. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen before you say anything. Her face softened with concern. Of course, sweetheart. When I told her, her eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't pull away. She hugged me, held me like she did when I was a kid, and said, "We'll get through this together." The relief was overwhelming. I wasn't alone anymore. Over time, I told my close friends and my partner. Some took it better than others, but I was prepared for that. The ones who stayed proved to me that real love, whether romantic or platonic, doesn't falter in the face of adversity. My partner and I had a long, honest conversation about what this meant for us. They asked questions, did their own research, and stood by me. That's when I knew they were someone truly special. Starting treatment felt like crossing a threshold. The first pill I took was a symbol of control, of taking my life back from fear and uncertainty. The doctors reassured me that with medication, my viral load would become undetectable, meaning I couldn't transmit the virus to anyone else. Those words were like a balm to my soul. I joined an online support group not long after. At first, I just lurked, reading other people's stories and soaking in their strength. There was one story, in particular, that stuck with me. A man in his 40s who had been living with HIV for over 20 years. He talked about his career, his husband, their kids. It was the first time I really believed that my life could still be everything I'd dreamed of. Now, a year later, I'm on medication and undetectable. My health is good, and my outlook on life has shifted. I've learned to let go of shame and embrace my humanity. I've met incredible people who remind me every day that I'm not defined by my diagnosis. In some ways, I've become stronger, resilient, more empathetic. One unexpected thing this journey has taught me is the power of vulnerability. Sharing my story has been terrifying, but it's also been healing. The more I open up, the more I realize how many people are carrying their own burdens in silence. HIV isn't a death sentence. It's not the end of my story. If anything, it's a new chapter, one where I'm learning to live more fully, more authentically. To anyone out there struggling with a similar diagnosis, I want you to know this. You're not alone. It's okay to feel scared, angry, or even hopeless at times. But there's a whole community of people who understand, who care, and who will support you. You are not your diagnosis. You are so much more than that. And if you're still in that quiet, sterile office, clutching your own pamphlet and feeling like your world has stopped, remember, the world hasn't. It's still turning. And so are you.